I'm totally writing a book about lesbians in film. So I've been watching like a bunch of lesbian movies. Fuck. Oh no. Fuck. No, no, no. Fuck. Shit, no. Fuck. Welcome back to These Are the Gays of Our Lives, which is a YouTube series I do mostly for my own amusement. Somewhat for your amusement. This week we're going to talk about Elena Undone, which is probably classically one of my least favorite movies of all time. One of these days I'm going to have something positive to say about a movie, but it's probably not going to be today. Have you ever watched a 2-hour-long movie, and at the end of the 2 hours you realize that you could have just watched the 3-minute trailer and you would have learned exactly the same amount of information? That just happened to me. Guess which movie? It's maybe this one, Elena Undone. To put it another way, this is not a movie that's going to require a lot of thought from you. In fact, the less you think about it is probably for the better. The greatest suspension of disbelief that this movie is going to ask from you is that somebody actually named their child Peyton. They did. The biggest shock for me personally in Elena Undone is the fact that it was made in 2010. The whole time I was watching it, I thought it was a 90s movie. They even call each other on landlines, so it was kind of confusing. But it came out in 2010, which leads me to believe that it's a period piece possibly about the 90s. As a director, Nicole Conn is kind of a repeat offender. She also did A Perfect Ending, Claire of the Moon, or whatever that movie was. They're all real sappy, real drawn out, and to me not very well made movies, nor very well acted for the most part. It's dealing with subjects that most of humanity could probably relate to on some base level. Do you have feelings? You might like this movie. I would like to apologize in advance for anyone that I offend with this film review, particularly Nicole Conn. I respect all lesbian filmmakers and writers and artists in some way because there's like 12 of them. So here's looking at you, kid. That said, this movie was terrible. So first off, let's talk about the cast. First we have Elena's motivational speaker friend, whose biggest character revelation through the entire movie is that even though he acts super gay, he's totally not even gay, you guys. Isn't that crazy? He's actually married to a woman, Velociraptor. He merges two words together that don't really make a lot of sense, soul and symmetry, to make the word slimmetry. Through the entire movie, I thought he was just mispronouncing something. It didn't really come across very well. His actual job is performing lectures about finding your twin flame. I really don't know what that means. I'm assuming that a twin flame is maybe something like my evil doppelganger who tries to replace me in life or something. He just means soulmate, which is more or less the same difference, I guess. Next, there is Elena, who at some point is going to come undone, as you might have heard, so get ready for that. She has an extremely emotional son with an extremely emotional haircut named Nash. This is already kind of a long one, so I'm just gonna let that name slide for right now. Her husband's name is Church Guy, from what I can tell. His defining characteristic, I think, is that he really doesn't like gay people, but considering the fact that his wife is a woman who wants to have sex with women and not him, I guess it's understandable. Finally, we have that fucking asshole Peyton. She's a writer who's writing about being a writer, writing about herself in a movie. It's pretty meta. The primary thing about Peyton that makes me think that I would want to hang out with her in real life is actually the fact that she owns her own pool. That is her most interesting characteristic to me through this entire movie. I'm kind of puzzled why she isn't using it for lesbian orgies a la Nazimova in the 1920s, but then you see the title of her book and it's like an agoraphobic's guide to blah blah blah. Fucking hell, Peyton, you made your fucking point. No pool parties, great. Can these two crazy kids ever make it work? Let's find out. Elena and Peyton meet at an adoption agency, which is completely baffling to me, but, you know, it's probably a tender plot point for those more inclined towards family life. They start hitting it off in a way that includes both of them buttoning their shirt, only one button down from the collar, and walking around in a park while something that sounds kind of like the Indigo Girls mixed with Tracy Chapman mixed with Melissa Etheridge, only gayer, is playing in the background. Peyton and Elena keep looking at each other, and like the 90s music keeps raising in volume until I come to believe that we have landed ourselves in a montage, which should be pretty much considered a crime against film, except for in the 80s. Then they go to sit on a couch to talk about why their relationships don't work, which, if you've been paying attention, is actually a mating ritual of the lesbian as seen in American film. Observe. Really, we mostly hear from Peyton during this time period because Elena is not the one who wrote the movie, you know? Really, all we discover about Elena is the fact that she thinks her husband's a jerk, which we discovered in the first 12 seconds of the movie. Plot points flying at me so fast I just can't handle them. I don't know. Elena starts stroking Peyton's hair during a film shoot at one point. They're kind of gross, you guys. I mean, Peyton has a visible boner through this entire movie. I have a quick point to make. If we look at American cinema and what lesbian filmmakers have contributed to American cinema, there are very few milestones, which is extremely unfortunate. There's obviously famous directors such as Jermaine Dulac. We've got a few. We've got Dorothy Arzner. Don't quote me on that being the end-all be-all of lesbian filmmakers, because it's absolutely not. But if you want to see one of the milestones that lesbians have contributed to film, it is found in this movie, this ungodly, terrible movie, and it's the longest kiss scene in film. Let me rephrase that real fast. It's the longest kiss scene ever. That's what we're bringing to the table? That's just fucking great. The kiss scene goes down like this, and it's not the only thing that went down, but wait for it. Elena shows up at Peyton's house. Peyton's just like, BRB, I gotta go cut the sleeves off my flannel shirt real fast. So she goes and hides in her room for about 20 minutes talking to herself, which is totally what you're supposed to do if you have a crush on somebody and they show up at your house. What? So then she goes back outside, and they sit on their famous couch that they like to chill on, and Peyton really just uncomfortably reveals the fact that she has a crush on Elena. And Elena gets really, really moved by this and just says, like, you know, I'm willing to give you everything, all parts of me, every part of me, except for sex. Peyton's like, that's cool, because I have orgasms when we hug, so whatever. And Elena says, that's cool, I really just wanted to have emotional control over somebody because I feel powerless in my role as a pastor's wife and mother to a son that cries way too much in this movie. Elena goes home, and Peyton masturbates off screen about 3,000 times. So Elena starts calling Peyton every 5 minutes just to let her know that she looked up gay online, and it sounds much more appealing to her as time progresses, as long as we remember that she for sure is not a lesbian, except for the part where she only wants to have sex with women and never with men. She goes over to Peyton's house, and they have the longest kiss scene ever. Honestly, I can't even begin to process the bad wardrobe choices, the cinematography, and the out-of-control 90s guitar riffs that come together to make this one of the most unintentionally hilarious moments in cinema history. I guess long is really the best word that we could use to describe this scene. And then when they're done kissing for 15 or 20 minutes, Elena just punches Peyton in the arm and says, "Lesbians have cooties," and runs away. Peyton masturbates off-screen about 3,000 more times. It's pretty romantic, isn't it? Except Elena's still married. Can I just, like, go out on a limb just for a second and say what terrible people these two are right now? Elena keeps doing this emotionally manipulative thing with Peyton and just saying, my husband's not touched me since I saw you last. Like, it's fucking ridiculous. On the other hand, her husband is a complete jackass, and it's really not that surprising that Elena wants to sleep with Peyton, because Peyton owns her own pool. My top 10 list of turn-ons is pretty much just the words, own your own pool, written 10 times in a row. I would sleep with 100% of lesbians that own their own pool. Too bad Peyton just uses hers to cry in. Some would say that that entire pool was filled only with the tears of Peyton. Well, about 20 minutes after the longest kiss scene of all time, these two jokers finally get around to having sex. Lesbian sex in movies, in case you're not familiar, is basically just the camera focuses in from the shoulders up, and the two women sit as far away from each other as physically possible while being able to still touch each other. They stroke each other's faces and hairs. There's some indistinguishable flesh shots. They have emotion orgasms, and then they fall asleep and usually have their clothes on when they do. If that's what sex looks like, I think I've been doing it really wrong for a really long time. Elena goes to Hawaii with her husband for pretty indistinguishable reasons. It seems that she's been trying to have another child with her husband and it hasn't been going well because they never have sex and she's a lesbian. He's really mad. And meanwhile, while they're gone, Elena's son, Nash, he discovers this whole mess of badly written letters by Peyton, which, you know, in case you're forgetting, she's a writer. She wrote a bunch of letters to Elena about how she straight up got ravaged by her, and this teenage boy starts crying. And he continues to cry for most of the rest of the movie. He steals a bottle of alcohol from a convenience store, and then he drinks it on a hill crying. His girlfriend, who is a brainiac, shows up and says some non-teenager sounding things, as she's been doing for most of the movie. His mom gets home and he cries at her some more, and they decide that they're gonna have to break it up, that Elena and that Peyton, because clearly this is not a world that accepts the love of whatever the fuck this is. Elena and Church Guy get a divorce for I don't know why. You know, they don't seem to like each other very much, I guess. Time passes, 6 months apparently, as the film is telling us. Elena runs into Peyton in the park. Elena's happy to see Peyton. Peyton sees that Elena's pregnant and calls her a whore. Peyton, we do not speak to women like that, and especially not whenever you're calling them a whore for sleeping with their actual spouse. Oh wait though, it's time to do the twist with Chubby Checka, because Elena's actually impregnated by her twin flame boyfriend, gay not gay, married to the Velociraptor guy. Artificial insemination, which for Peyton just makes a good thing even better, because it means that she gets to have a girlfriend, they get to have a kid, and no boy parts touched anybody. Elena continues to remind us a few more times that she is in fact not a lesbian, which is something that we all need to keep in mind as she enters this long-term lesbian relationship with Peyton. Let's face it, Elena doesn't come super undone in this movie. She kind of toys with everybody's emotions, accidentally divorces her husband, and ends up with Peyton for kind of arbitrary reasons. If that's a happy ending, well, okie dokie, I guess this is a happy ending then. Okay, you guys, to wrap it up, I'm gonna take you through a few of my favorite quotes. A coincidence is when God performs a miracle and prefers to keep it anonymous. By the brainiac with the scrunchie that I barely mentioned, for obvious reasons. Hashtag shit Peyton says. Women are so complex, so multi-dimensional. I just want to dig in. I want to show all their colors, show everything that makes a woman so delicious. You're not the only one with feelings. I'm just so confused. Can we agree to call it a serious crush? Elena coming undone.